Okay, welcome everybody to the work session, special work session at that, and I'm going to call the order of the meeting. First thing, I'm going to call the roll. Vice Mayor. Here. Alderman Blanton. Here. Alderman Hanson. Here. Alderman Peterson. Here. Alderman Berger.
Present.
Alderman Brown.
Present.
Alderman Potts.
Present.
And Alderman Baggett.
Present.
And the mayor's here also. The next item on the agenda is an item for citizens to be able to make comments. I have Ned Dannenberg who wants to speak. And Ned, you have 2 minutes. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Hello, Ned Dannenberg from Bike Walk Franklin. And Mr. Mayor and members of the board, had the chance to meet with many of you individually, but wanted to speak tonight to urge strong consideration of capital investment projects that will improve access for people walking and biking in our city. Survey after survey show that aside from housing, traffic and congestion are really a top concern for residents of Franklin. But our engineer friends here will tell you we cannot solve traffic jams long term by widening road after road. More space for cars only encourages more people to use their cars, creating more traffic. The roads become just as congested as they were before, a cycle called induced demand. Instead, members of Bike Walk Franklin urge the city to build out alternatives that are just as good or even better than getting around in a car. City surveys show that walkabilities and greenways are a top desire for our residents, and a well-connected network that would allow our neighbors of all ages and abilities to get around in ways that are cheaper, healthier, and cause less congestion than driving. Over the past year, Bike Walk Franklin has been gathering citizen feedback on social media and one-on-one meetings about the places where our citizens most want to see sidewalks or paths and the places that push them so close to traffic they just don't feel safe. I'm pleased that many of these areas are already on the city's radar, though they've been assigned varying levels of priority. We urge the board to devote resources to places like Eddy Lane, where our families are effectively trapped on their street because there's no sidewalk to reach Fort Granger or our fantastic factory district. We heard from more than a dozen residents of Franklin Green frustrated that Boyd Mill Avenue was so close to getting a sidewalk the last CIP cycle, but got postponed at the last minute, leaving no way for their children to get to the soccer fields or Jim Warren Park without their parents having to drive them. And I've seen several cyclists, runners, even a gentleman in a wheelchair traveling on the shoulder of Mac Hatcher near the water treatment plant just because we're missing that 1 mile section of our fantastic greenway that would open up connections to Cool Springs. So I know there's some tough decisions ahead, but I urge you guys to envision a community where our families can get around however they choose and enjoy that all of our great city has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. Okay. I guess I threw the agenda away. That's one way to end it, isn't it? This is a special work session, and we're going to be starting our capital projects review. And there's going to be a series of meetings that we'll be having, and we're started out with transportation. I understand. I do not anticipate we'll get through all the road projects, but we're going to have a hard stop at 6:30. So.
Start backwards. Please start with presentation.
So
That's
that's,
where we're
all I have, and Mr. Stevens.
I'll say a
you wanna
couple words
anything?
get us started off and then hand it off to Paul and Jonathan. This is the start of the process, and we start with just trying to understand needs, identify projects, get your feedback on what's been identified to date, but also what else are we missing, or are there elements that could be modified within a project to better meet community needs? And so, as you know, this is a 10-year plan that we lay out that we generally try to update every 2 to 3 years. COVID added a year to this cycle just with that uncertainty. But so we're back at it to update our project plans, what we're looking at, what projected costs look like, and how we move forward. And generally, we try to look at what your priorities are and the overall community needs, and then try to start matching that up with funding sources and financing strategies and approaches, and the mix of what we pay for with certain cash sources and what we end up supporting with debt that we issue. The last 10-year plan had about 60% supported by cash resources and 40% supported by debt. The previous iteration was probably about 50-50. So I would expect we'll be somewhere in that range around where those two plans were, but that is something for us to look at too as we get deeper into this process and look at what capacity looks like matched up against the priorities you've identified. But we start first with understanding projects, understanding needs, and getting your feedback. And so that's what Paul and Jonathan will walk through tonight. It's an important process. We'll get as far as we can tonight, as the mayor said, by 6:30. And then we have a few more of these to schedule, and we'll be glad to get those going and keep working through the projects that have been identified. There's over 70 here right now, and there will probably be some more that you all identify for us, and we want to hear that feedback as we go. So we'll also cover kind of how we got here. There is some staff prioritization, not really prioritization, but evaluation of projects, and we want to give you at least a little overview of what we looked at in assessing those and what those are. You ultimately are setting that priority, and your priorities end up being what we call 5-star projects. But we want to start with this in mind and give you that framework, and then, like I said, get your feedback and move this process forward. So Paul and Jonathan, take it away.
Okay, and if it's all right with you, Mayor, what I'd like to do is go through the entire presentation first, and then this is really your meeting to deliberate with each other, and we're just here to offer feedback and support to you. And then once we get through, we can then discuss the projects and how you want to proceed with the transportation and advocate for whatever project you'd like to. So if you're following, I made the same mistake last year as I did this year, is I didn't put page numbers on these, and I probably should have done that. But as you walk through, if you're wanting to take notes in here, you'll see every project has a project number. And if you follow that project number, you can easily find it in your book. And we're going to go in order for the transportation. So if you have questions on that, just feel free to stop us as we go through the presentation here. So we're going to talk about, hit an overview of the transportation scorecard review. Review of the unfunded projects. So the funded projects we're not going to go through. I'm assuming at this point you guys are very knowledgeable on all those projects. However, if there are questions, we're happy to dive back into those. And then again, open it up for discussion. So this is just an overview. Again, help from a lot of different staff members to identify these projects and help us price it out. 73 total projects were identified that could potentially be needed in the next 10 years. And again, as Eric said, staff with the department directors pretty much gave a 1 through 4-star rating based on what we feel is the need and priority. However, we don't get to make the final decision. Y'all pick those 5-star projects, and those are the ones that make it into a funding plan, and then we start working on. So how do we rank them? Generally, we look at the strategic plan, and it varies from different, group to group. But for transportation projects, we really look at economic development opportunities. How do we support, one, our existing businesses, which I think is extremely important, but then two, where do we want to see growth in the city of Franklin, which historically has been the Goose Creek area was what was identified as that high growth opportunity area. But again, economic development also includes supporting those existing businesses. We look at traffic congestion. Where are the improvements needed to improve traffic flow? And then safety is also another big factor that we take into consideration. A lot of the safety deals mainly with signalization of projects, or like a Clovercroft Road is an example there where we would look at safety as bringing up that priority list. Another one, I didn't list it here too, is we look at opportunity. Is there an opportunity to partner with a developer? Is there an opportunity to partner with TDOT? Or do we foresee an opportunity to partner with TDOT or the MPO through federal funding? So this is a scorecard. Again, high level, what I would say is that these projects generally take anywhere from 4 to 7 years to deliver, depending on the complications of utilities, federal funding. And so as we get moving on a lot of these projects, it really hurts us to take a step back and pull it off. But some of these projects, you'll notice that we have not, it's a 10-year plan. they're farther off in that plan, and we didn't spend a ton of money on it. So if I had to throw out a recommendation of potential projects, I don't get to make those choices. Potential projects you may choose to pull, they could include something like Carlisle Lane, and I can tell you that that was really put in the plan mainly because Mac Hatcher was coming, and we also had the Williamson County Animal Control Center, and we also had a few subdivisions that developed over there. I'll tell you that the traffic hasn't increased that much, and we're not seeing a ton of accidents over there, and we're not getting a lot of complaints. But again, totally up to you if you want to look at pulling that plan or that project. Another one was Paytonsville Road and the Pratt Lane intersection improvements. That was kind of put out there because of the development happening with Ramsey Solutions, K-Love, and all those other developments, and trying to make sure we had funding out there potentially if the city needed to help participate. But the way that's going right now is we're really relying on the developers to help us make those improvements and investments out in that area of the city. And I would still love to get some feedback on the Main Street Sidewalk Repair Project, where we initially scoped it, and what's priced here was simply a remove and replacement of the pavers. Is that something you want to continue to proceed with? Or was there a vision to re-scope that project and look bigger and much more expensive than what we're showing here? So those are three projects I would just kind of highlight. The others were pretty far along.
Let me jump in on one of those real quick, just to cover on the Paytonsville Road, Pratt Lane improvements that Paul talked about and referenced to specifically Ramsey Solutions. The one component we made a commitment to in the economic development transaction was that bridge upgrade or replacement. We are doing that through the bridge project, group of bridge projects that bundle bridge project that we put out for bid. So we are meeting that obligation through that smaller group of projects, and this is added capacity and improvements, but you are meeting your commitment to that economic development project with that through an existing project that's already bidding. So that's just so you know, if you remember that we made a commitment, we are meeting it. This is not part of that. That proposed project is not part of that.
Correct. All right, we'll continue, and we'll come back to this slide at the end if you guys would like to discuss it and debate it and ask questions. So this is, first project we have here is going to be the Goose Creek Bypass and Carruthers Parkway extension. We ranked it as a 4-star project mainly because there's a lot of economic development. It's a high-growth area. I don't believe there's any single developer that's going to be able to come in here and bite this off. I look at this as an opportunity project, as when development happens out here, we should be prepared to assist and make this investment. And ultimately, we want to start with 4-lane median divided facilities closer to the interchanges. So you're going to want to either start at Goose Creek or Highway 96. I would not start building a 4-lane highway, down by Ladd Park and across the river and Echo and that area. I'd really highly recommend we start near the interchange and work our way to the middle. Again, the Goose Creek area is in a short-term growth opportunity, so this really would support economic development and new growth. And it would also eventually help support existing development along Carruthers Parkway, all those residential developments. I want to say it's around 3,000 houses that have ultimately been approved in that corridor. So that's why we ended up ranking it as a 4-star project. Aspen Grove and Seaboard Lane intersection improvement. This project, and I don't know if you ever drive this area of the city, this is really just a AM and PM peak hour delay problem. Is when the businesses all let out at the same time and all start at the same time, they have some pretty major backups. The heavy movement is on Seaboard Lane and Aspen Grove, and it does back up. It's only a 1-star project because it's really just that peak hour, but it would be good to one day see if we can get this project completed. Again, this section of Carruthers Parkway from South Carruthers Road to State Route 96, we ranked it as a 3-star project. Again, it supports its existing development. There's not a ton of economic development opportunity here, but one day this will need to be widened to that 4-lane median divided, paralleling the interstate, and improve this capacity.
And this is one that we did the grading for the additional lane, or not?
This is further north.
Okay,
further
sorry.
This is up near Walker.
I'm sorry. Right.
Is 4 lanes
It is
Well,
not.
It's
It's-
right across from Walker it is, but further down where it narrows down
Falcon
past the
Creek.
driver's license.
Falcon Creek,
3 lanes.
that area.
Lewisburg Pike, this is another project. We ranked it as a 3-star. It's included in the regional transportation plan, and if you have questions on that, Jonathan is definitely the expert at that, but it has not made the funding list within the regional transportation plan. Our recommendation is, while this is a good project, it needs to be done, generally on state routes, I try to encourage the board and recommend that you spend our money on city roads and wait for federal participation on state routes. There have been times where we've not done that. Hillsborough Road is an example. But generally speaking, I would strongly encourage us to spend local dollars on local roads unless the federal government is agreeing to participate in the project cost. Section of North Royal Oaks, 2-star project. This is the only section on Mallory and Royal Oaks that has not been widened to 4 to 5 lanes. That'll eventually need to be done. We're not seeing major backups, major queuing. Again, I'd recommend that we get that Liberty, Mallory, North Royal Oaks intersection completed before we do this project, but eventually this will become a priority.
Now, that's the one that's just kind of real winding.
That's
Yep,
correct.
very winding. It'll be a challenging project. Next one is, this is a section that Eric was talking about before, Carruthers Parkway, where we've actually already purchased the right-of-way, which was a great decision, and we've graded it out for the future 4 lanes, which will make it a fairly easy project. However, we only ranked it as a 2-star, with the main reasoning being, again, we feel we should try to improve closer to the interchanges and get that to 4 lanes before we widen the middle section.
Are you talking about any particular intersections, interchanges rather?
Well,
on
we
that
would
one?
widen from South Carruthers Road to 96, or from Long Lane and the Long Lane to Goose Creek Extension. Yep. North
Yeah.
and south of this is what
Yeah,
we,
the issue being that if you widen in the middle, you would eventually be creating a bottleneck north or south one.
yeah. So First Avenue multi-use trail, again, this is just, while it's a good project and definitely would improve connectivity and walkability in our historic downtown area, we'll end up ranking it as 1-star project, just comparing it to the others. But it would, long-term, we do need to try to get Pinkerton Park connected up into Bicentennial Park. So Oxford Glen Drive, this is the multi-use trail. We've talked about this many, many times. We only gave it a 1-star project. I think realistically, we need to get this done and it should be done, but really I would try to focus on partnering with the HOA to see if they could dedicate the property to us. And maybe we could use sidewalk gap funding to complete that over time is where I would look to do that. However, you could also attempt to fund it through the CIP process as well. But ultimately, I think it needs to be some level of a partnership with the HOAs that control the property and get them to help contribute to moving the project forward.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
do you prefer us to hold our questions till
If
he
you
goes
would,
through
that's-
those?
Paul wanted to wait until he got
All right,
through,
I'll wait, thank
or
you.
at least where he thought the stopping point was to keep us within our time constraint.
And we just heard about Boyd Mill Avenue. This is the one section of Boyd Mill Avenue that's not improved yet. Southern Land's actually in the process of improving 96 up to the where you see the red here, close to Franklin Green. And so this will be the one section that has not been improved. We put a temporary traffic signal in at Downs Boulevard and Boyd Mill that's over 15 years old at
It's
least.
almost 20 years old, the temporary signal on the wood poles, yeah.
So it would be nice to be able to connect these subdivisions to the different parks and get the bike lanes in and the sidewalks in. But as far as generating a lot of capacity and moving traffic, it does not do a lot of that. I can tell you that.
Why again are you not running 96?
Southern Land is actually, as part of an offset agreement, they're improving their frontage.
So they would have that last section.
That's correct. And yeah,
turn-
connects in
where
there,
it
they
turns
connect
there.
to that section of Boyd Mill, so they had to improve it.
Yeah, so Southern Land will be improving that section.
And that includes sidewalk bike lane, all that,
You're
all
approving
the
for
full
it,
improvement.
That's correct.
Full improvements. Clovercroft Road, this is our next McEwen. This is a challenging project. What makes it even more challenging is that it's in the county and in the city. It's a very expensive project. It needs to long-term move up the list for sure. There are safety concerns. We've recently done a pretty big safety project with signage, and we're attempting to work with the county to also improve safety on this road. I'll tell you that the crashes on this section of road are at about the state average. It's when we start really, really monitoring it when it hits that state average. Obviously, we don't want it to go above the state average, but recently we've worked with the street department to upgrade a significant number of signage on that road, and we're trying to also work with the county to get them to upgrade some signage over the next month is what we're working on. You know, ultimately, it would take a partnership. One option, too, we're going to talk with the county about long-term is looking at maybe a joint spot safety project. A lot of the accidents appear to be where we need shoulder improvements, and folks are going off into the ditches. And so most of those accidents are actually in the county versus the city. But, you know, this is something we need to continue to monitor long-term as growth continues in this area of the city.
And just as an aside, that is only the western half of that lower section of Clovercroft. That's not the full Clovercroft all the way to Wilson Pike.
But we are actively discussing with the highway department the potential of a spot safety project. And if that comes forward, we'll bring that forward as an opportunity.
And previously, we've done some spot safety in our section, just
Yes,
in
yeah.
certain areas, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Steve Grubb, I know, has done some ditch work and shoulder work and
He
some
sure
other
has.
this is one that got added last round CIP is West Main Street. We gave it a 2-star project. You know, I don't know that the state's ever going to come in and try to bite this section of West Main off, but you know, it would be nice to get federal funding, but there's definitely redevelopment opportunities. It helps serve certain areas of the city, underserved areas of the city where the residents really do need more transit and sidewalks to access different facilities. So this would be a good project to do long-term, and we're definitely seeing redevelopment happen along this section of West Main. Columbia Avenue, again, 2-star projects. There's definitely sections of Columbia Avenue here that do not have any sidewalk at all. It should be targeted. You're seeing redevelopment happen along here. You know, and I'll say this about West Main and Columbia Avenue is really the time to strongly consider doing these projects is when water and sewer and gas say, we need to upgrade all of our utilities. They're failing, and we just need to totally upgrade these. That's probably the right time, in my opinion, to say we ought to just turn it into a CIP project because they also have really bad stormwater systems and need stormwater systems put in to both West Main and Columbia Avenue.
But it is kind of. Does that mean that the moving sewer and electric, that would come out of our cost? When we did that, if we did that, they would come out of our cost here. This anticipates us doing all that.
This anticipates us
ourselves.
doing water, sewer,
Thank you.
gas, electric,
Got it.
storm. Machatcher Parkway Southeast widening is obviously a 4-star project. I'd probably say it's a 5-star project, but I can't speak for you. But the city is actively working with TDOT and the GNRC, MPO to identify funding. Recently, we submitted on, and Jonathan, help me out here.
It's the statewide partnership program.
And offering to contribute $5 million to try to move this project forward. Ultimately, you would have to approve that. And so we're hopeful that that moves the needle on this project. The projected horizon year with the MPO is 2035.
And that was with the RTP, that's with the regional transportation plan. So think of that as like their major thoroughfare plan for the region. Actually, since that was done, you're approaching about 5 years old with that plan. Well, not quite 5 years, it's the middle of that. The latest transportation improvement program, so the MPO's TIP, so that's kind of like our CIP program, but for the region. There's actually funding programmed for NEPA, so environmental and design, with using federal dollars for the 2026 fiscal year. So that's actually programmed funding for this section of Mac Hatcher. So there actually is funding in there. It's not enough, but it's program funding. So that actually is a little more, that actually is much more aggressive than the 2035. Just happens to be the 2035 RTP is an older number.
So it's good
NEPA?
that there's at least some funding in the program.
Yes.
What we're trying to do is use some targeted city dollars to move it up in that program. And they're trying to show leverage and partnership, just like we
Yeah,
try to
yeah,
do
yeah.
the same when we look for opportunities. That's what they're looking to do. So
We're trying to say basically,
Yeah.
kind of like we did the last section of Mac Hatcher
Yeah.
is, hey, we can put some city money towards environmental and design. Let us help you with that. We'll fully fund that. And then, but you guys need to commit to us that you're going to go through, because this really doesn't need right of way. It may need a few easements, but come back to us, save what federal funding, because right now the funding they do have shown is 80% federal funding, even at the tip level of the MPO. Save that funding, get some additional federal funding to put towards construction is what we're saying to them. So let us fund the upfront design, keep us involved with it, but use your funding later, use state funding, use federal funding later for construction, but make that commitment to us.
what we've also done on several projects too is outside of the local money, we've also just provided project support
Yes.
through our staff, whether that's working on right-of-ways and easements or just other issues, because we're kind of on the front lines. We can help facilitate that. So that's always there too, to help support moving the project forward.
Are they
We
look-
have the right of way though, because
Yeah.
they had it from the
Well,
first.
There still may
We
be
pretty
some-
much do, yeah. There may be a
One
few.
section.
Yeah, you never know. So we wanted to carry a number for potential right away, but we should have it for the most part.
Vast majority.
Yeah, that really wouldn't be right. It would be more easements for probably like utility easements and things like that, because a lot of times your utilities are set right at the edge of the right of way. So if something had to be relocated, like any kind of electrical lines or gas lines that are typically set right at the edge of the right of way, those typically require some additional easements at the edge of the right of way. And the other place I was thinking of when we put this number in here was the Rock Bluff there
Yeah.
at the edge, right there as you approach between Lewisburg and Royal Oaks. We know that that's going to be pretty significant, and then that right of way is not acquired yet. So there is going to be some right of way
I
in
think we
there.
have that.
That was one of the reasons that held up the previous safety project that we talked about with TDOT, when they were going to do a little bit of widening on Royal Oaks to try to get some additional laneage in there temporarily. That was what prevented that from happening, because it violated their design standards, because that Rock Bluff was too close to the roadway.
Did you say you got NEPA funds? I mean, what kind of funds?
It's what's
We get-
preliminary. It's preliminary engineering.
Yeah.
NEPA, it's the environmental.
I mean, do they actually give us funds for that?
They don't. Yeah, it's part of the federal fund. It can be used. Federal funding can be used for NEPA.
Oh, didn't know. Okay.
So Paul, when we've got Lewisburg on there and that on there, they should be closer together. If you're doing, you understand what I'm saying? I wouldn't want to go in and do this without doing the part that.
So if you look at this map, what we would do is we would work with TDOT
Exactly.
to get this section of Lewisburg done, and we would get that up to full capacity.
Yep.
And that really needs to happen first before we ever even think about doing that, because that'll get the vehicles through the intersection and taper them back down and really, really improve capacity.
So think of how we did the most recent section of Mac Hatcher with the northwest section. When they told us they wanted to reduce that to 2 lanes, we said, okay, we get why you're doing that to save costs, but at least build the intersections out.
Which will make it last many, many more
Yes.
years. So, Mac Hatcher Southwest Extension, we gave it a 2-star project. Obviously, we should wait for the State and Federal Highways Administration to provide us with state and federal fundings to move forward with it. It's honestly our recommendation that we look to get Columbia Avenue widened and eventually Downs Boulevard widened before you really jump on this section of Mac Hatcher, but I did at least want to have it in the CIP for you all to discuss. And obviously, a good chunk of it goes through what's outside of the city limits. And you'll notice that on all slides, the gray area is outside current city limits. Obviously, it's within our urban growth boundary, but we did want to try to clarify that. Yeah.
And that's nowhere on any
No
current
radar.
TDOT plans or planning horizon. So it's out there, but it is their project, but we want to keep it just identified as a long-term build out.
As we're saying, a lot of that's not inside the city.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
And when you say long-term, you're talking 25, 30, 40,
I don't think it'll become a state priority for a very, very long time. Yeah. I think I will be retired before it becomes a state priority.
It'll be your 40th year as an alderman.
I like that anniversary present. I'll
We
take,
won't need it
I'll
'cause-
take it 35 years earlier, though.
We won't need it because we'll have flying cars. There you go. Forget it.
Yes.
We'll be
So
back for you.
we never talk to our legislative officials and whoever else it is, because that right there is, for me, that is a super project that needs to be done. And I even rate that ahead of Columbia Avenue and Downs as far as how my personal rankings are. But yet we're depending on the state to come in and do 100.
Their project.
I'm not arguing, I'm not arguing about that. But we've got state senators, we've got state representatives here. Do we not challenge them to challenge whoever they would need at the state level to move this up?
We certainly make them aware of projects. There is a bias towards enhancing existing roadways and routes before
Okay.
adding new. I mean, that's generally, and that's some of what we faced with the Northwest Extension. That was a slog. We pushed, as you know,
Yep.
for years and years and years, put city money in, and we just kept talking about it. This is probably in that same category. It will be longer because we've got other things and they've got other priorities on their list, but we do keep it in the dialogue. I think that is exactly right. But the expectation is these other improvements on existing roadways are going to take priority.
And let me just interject that on the project rankings, actually, Columbia south of Franklin ranks higher than southeast Mac Hatcher.
Yes,
But I was
with
able
the
to get a
state, right?
footnote on that particular project that's really a bottleneck.
Yeah.
And so I've asked that the staging be, for southeast, be before Columbia. And so
Thank
hopefully
you.
that would carry some weight.
Thank you.
But if you do Columbia Avenue within Franklin,
They're gonna do-
the next bottleneck is southeast Mac Hatcher. If you do 31, the next bottleneck is southeast Mac Hatcher. So some of that is going to be important as far as staging. And Jonathan advises me on the Transportation Policy Board, and we work pretty closely on a lot of these things to make sure that
And that was something that came out of the various plans because the state does their own 3-year plan or 4-year plan. MPO does their plan, and we do our local planning. And when those things come together, sometimes the way those are prioritized, they come out a bit with things that come out like that, those bottlenecks that are potentially going to happen, like Mac Hatcher. So we talked about that and said, hey, and the state was good about coming to the MPO and saying, hey, if you see things in here like that, please bring those to our attention because we're looking at the whole state here, and those kind of things do pop up from time to time.
Okay, moving to Mallory Lane. Cool.
Do you get to, at the MPO, how often do you have time to go once in a while?
MPO meets, or the Transportation
Yeah, I know
Policy
Jonathan
Board meets
goes.
every other month.
Yeah.
Jonathan is part of the TCC,
Yeah.
which is more like the Planning Commission. But we meet, we've had one special call meeting, but generally it's every other month.
Okay, because I know Greg Lawrence, I used to go to MPO and
We meet
advocate,
once a month.
advocate for Wilson Pike and the one-lane tunnels and stuff. So I was just wondering how
And they
much
they
advocating we can do at those meetings.
Probably, I think the best advocating is, where we've made more progress is probably through the mayor's caucus.
Yeah.
Because we've had those one-on-one meetings with Commissioner Ely. And,
Aren't you president of that right now? Let's get
I've
some.
been leading it for some time,
Let's-
but
let's
the
get some-
point is that they view that as an important group to, particularly the Transportation Modernization Act. There was about 3 or 4 of us that were interacting with Commissioner Ely on that, and also up at the Capitol lobbying for that particular
Okay, thanks.
legislation.
Thank you.
All right, we're getting close to the end of the presentation. Mallory Lane, Cool Springs Boulevard, again, we have pretty extreme delay here during the peak periods projected with the development that's in the area. It's probably one of our biggest traffic issues right now that we're dealing with, but with the projected growth and development, we really need to start looking at trying to get this intersection upgraded. And again, we ranked it high because of traffic and the economic development, which is supporting our existing businesses, trying to get this improved. Another one is West McEwen Drive and Mallory Lane. This is, again, projected to be extreme delay or failure with the growth. So this is another intersection we should continue to target to try to get improved and support our existing development and proposed development. Eddie Lane, this is one we added because of the number of complaints we get due to the lack of sidewalk and bike ped facilities. It doesn't really generate a ton of capacity, but I know the residents out here have wanted a sidewalk for a very, very long time, and get them to the factory or to the different parks or even to downtown Franklin, and it would be a good project to get done. But again, it doesn't necessarily generate capacity as it relates to roadway and vehicles.
And
So South Margin.
I was going to say, talking about the problems, the utilities there, and I mean, because you got that Middle Tennessee Electric substation there. Thank you, and that's unfortunate. I mean, I live close by there and everything, and I know those people really wish that they had sidewalks and everything. But it's a tough one. Really tough one.
Well, whether we did anything to the road or not, we still need to look at the sidewalks in with
That's
the
right.
GAP sidewalk program that we have.
The
'Cause
cost
even-
of this is significantly probably beyond the capacity in the GAP project, so you
Okay.
probably need to look at that separately. There is also pretty significant utility work.
Absolutely.
I think the 3-lane will make a pretty significant impact on, just on the volume, but I'm not an engineer, but I think that will help a lot
Yep.
in terms of just making that road more usable, and being a good alternative route and a connection to the factory and other things going on. So I think it will evolve into a pretty important connection.
I'm just curious about Eddie Lane, because we had a lot of new homes put in there. And then we had the technology center, that high security center put in there, Franklin Special School District, but nobody, probably sidewalk to nowhere is why they didn't put it in, but were they all paying fees in lieu of for sidewalk? Do we have?
I think the data center put in a sidewalk.
did.
And Franklin
They did.
Special is also putting in a sidewalk.
They did.
But
Are
they're
they-
just doing their frontage is all that they're doing.
How about the other homes down the way?
If they came in as a single-family house, they generally don't get.
Well, they have them. Those
They do.
4 or
Oh, yeah,
5.
four.
There are spot
You're right.
sidewalks.
There
Several
was a
ones.
development, so I wonder if they paid impact fees or fee in lieu of the sidewalk, because they couldn't put it in at the time because there was no sidewalk to nowhere.
Generally, the
So we have-
individual houses that don't put it in, they do pay fees in lieu of.
I was wondering if we have some money stashed away from that we can pull from that Eddie Lane area from those developments.
They'll end up being a pretty short gap from the
Small.
residences to the Liberty Pike when Franklin Special's done.
That will help,
It's
yeah.
the others. It's the other way.
It's the other way.
I think we're trying to, when working with Franklin Special, make sure that there's not throwaway with some of that. And we're trying to minimize the throwaway associated with that once this road improvement would happen. So that's part of what we're looking at with them.
And has there ever been, a tracking of the traffic on Liberty on Eddie Lane, because a lot of cars and trucks?
Yeah, I can see if I can pull it up, but
Yeah.
if we have ADT counts on it, we can get
Yeah,
that out
that'd
to
be
you.
good. Thank you.
And I think we do.
We'll do that now with Replica.
This is one, South Margin Street, Fifth Avenue, intersection improvements. Baggett Lane.
No, we
It-
don't have to rename it.
It really needs a traffic signal. It really needs improved.
This was the.
It really needs improved pedestrian crossings.
Put his name on it.
We look at intersections as crashes per million entering vehicle. It kind of puts them all on the same platform as we relate to safety. And this one has one of the highest crash rates in the city of Franklin, just given the awkwardness and skew of the roadway. So Adam Mosier recently did apply for a grant to try to partner with the state to do that. We're hopeful that that'll go through. But y'all did give us the annual funding to at least start on the design. And so we've
That's
started
in the
that
current
process.
budget.
What was the grant for?
Is through this,
A amount. Do we,
I want to say it was about 2 million total is what we submitted, but we'll probably go back to the state for more because we were misled a little bit by them. They said we wouldn't have to go through local programs, but we do, which means the cost goes up substantially and the time to deliver goes up.
And by the time they actually tell us we get the grant.
It will
Money will go up.
cost, inflation will have hit more by then.
This is another project, Lewisburg Pike and Donaldson Creek, that a signal is now meeting a warrant. And so we should look to try to get that signal in. Again, funding has been provided to at least start on the design of it. And what we would probably do here is put up a temporary signal with just strain poles, and whenever we have to widen it is when we would do the permanent signal to just bring the cost down.
And let me just say, check to see how to spell Donaldson.
Sorry. Thank you. Battle Avenue Bridge Replacement Project. We actually received an ADA complaint from a disabled individual over here that this bridge really does not meet ADA compliance. And so it should really be prioritized to be replaced.
And that's right by the school entrance too.
Yeah.
So we would, that's why we ranked that as 4 stars, because it should get fixed as a higher priority. Franklin Road, again, we are actually starting to experience a lot of problems on Franklin Road traffic-wise. I think Alderman Baggett drives that way every day to work. But what we see happening a lot is the second there's an accident on the interstate, people south of here are getting off and they are trying to use Franklin Road, and also Brentwood did their section of Franklin Road. And so this is becoming a bottleneck. You know, we should wait for state and federal funding, but if the board really wanted to do something, we could look at revising the scope and maybe going to 2 northbound lanes, or just taking it to Mallory Station Road, or doing a smaller project just to bide more time until the state's ready to prioritize this. But I hope as they continue to look at 31, that this will get state and federal funding.
Is that AM and PM peak in particular, or throughout the day? What are
We're
we?
seeing it really bad in the AM. I'm not 100% sure.
I can tell you
the
about PM.
Yeah. You drive it every day?
PM's fine. But I think a turn lane at Barry's Chapel would fix a lot, because that's
We have talked about that
in the
for
morning time. Anyway, I don't want to get on the rabbit hole,
And let-
but the turn lane would to the left, or a light there
Yeah.
would actually that would do it.
That's interesting.
The turn lane work that we did a few years ago, I think,
Oh, yeah.
provided a
Very
lot of
good,
relief.
didn't it?
I mean, it's a fairly
Very
small,
good.
yeah, on Mallory Station,
Yes.
fairly small, but provided a good help.
Yes.
And maybe looking at something like that as a spot.
And that's kind of what we had
Well-
talked about internally among staff, was potentially extending, like right now where you go through the intersection from Mac Hatcher, it immediately tapers down just to get capacity through Mac Hatcher.
Yeah.
Is continuing that on up through that first light there at Legends, continuing that lane all the way up and connecting it through up to the right turn lane at Mallory Station. That would get you those 2 northbound lanes. Now, we obviously wouldn't put in curb and
I mean,
gutter, all that
Morsley.
stuff. We wouldn't
No, right,
state to
right.
do that, but
Moore's Lane.
more,
That
we
would be
wouldn't go all the way to
interesting.
Moore's Lane.
No.
So that would be
Mallory
kind of a,
Yeah.
Mallory.
this is the full cost.
Full
Yes,
cost.
this is the full
So
cost.
we could come up with some
We would
subset
do
ideas,
iterative.
turn lane, that extension that you talked about.
Because cars from the middle of Mac Hatcher and Franklin Road
Yeah.
in the morning time.
Yeah.
And then if you're not watching, you get
Yeah, I've
stuck,
seen that.
and that's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it was Embry's money. Didn't Embry put that?
It was
turn
your
lane in?
money, they paid the road impact fees.
Yes.
Bamry did the work for
Yes.
us.
They built that
Yep.
turn lane on the
This
Mallory
really,
Station.
it, as you were all saying, turned out really, really, really well.
Oh, that was huge help.
And so this is the last slide. What I was going to say is cost estimating this number of projects is very challenging. What we did this year, which is different from last year, is we looked at our ability to deliver these projects. And so if we thought it would take us 5 years to get to construction, we essentially looked at inflation and tied an inflationary number to it, so that the numbers you're seeing here, hopefully, you know, for example, this project here would probably take 7 years to get to construction with federal funding. We would tie an inflationary number to it to try to make sure that that estimate was as accurate as possible. And it's extremely difficult to guess and predict the utility impacts, but we tried to be very conservative with those impacts. And I think Jonathan has a chart here he
Yeah, I
could
can make sure.
show you real quick of,
So this is, said I could. There we go. There it was. Come on, buddy. There you go. It's thinking about it.
Yeah, talk to it next, Jonathan.
So this is actually, a lot of times you've heard a lot of places will keep up with cost inflation with consumer price index or producer price index. About 20 years ago, the federal government started keeping, actually the FHWA, so the Federal Highway Administration started keeping up with, specifically with highway construction costs. It's the National Highway Construction Cost Index. So they started keeping up with about 20 or 25 metrics that are specifically associated with highway construction costs. So asphalt, stone, steel costs, pavement, everything that's in the major categories that are involved with highway construction costs. And they've been tracking those over the last 20 years, and they track them per quarter. And what you're seeing up there is the chart. And they started with 2003 was the index level of 1.0. And what you're seeing is how that has tracked over time since over the last 20 years and what that looks like. The really cool thing about this is, and I say cool, it's you know, we're numbers folks in engineering, so we get kind of nerded out over this kind of stuff. But so just since the last time we did the CIP, I'll try to go and shrink this down. It'll take a second to update. But so you're taking your index, well, it didn't shrink. Come on, little buddy, don't let me down. Don't let me down.
It worked.
Good. Okay, not exactly what I wanted, but you can see, so from 2017, 1.7 is the index value all the way up to 2.7. So you start looking at how much inflationary factors that is. And I'll give you an example. So McEwen 4, when that was approved to move forward with in 2016, and we're working through the process to get that done, the estimated time was about 28, 29, $30 million in that range. And since that time, just using the index, just inflation alone, it puts that more at about $40 million now. That's just inflation. That's not anything has changed on the project, it's just inflation. Especially over the last, since COVID, you can see we've had kind of normal inflation go along through here. Let's see where my cursor's at. But since 2020 and 2021, we've really jumped from an index value of 1.86 to 2.8 almost. So you've really seen it spike. So what we've seen over the last 20 years is about a 5%, 4.5%, 5% average because of this spike inflation per year. But really in the last 3 to 5 years, rolling average, probably 7.5%, 8%, 9% average inflation cost per year for roadway construction. But this is a really good tool for us to be able to see kind of what inflation looks like. And this is actually in arrears about a year. So, you know, we don't know really what's happened recently because they're collecting all of this data. But this is some tools we have available to us now to be able to really see what costs are looking like and how we can project costs in the future. And like Paul said, if we put something later in the CIP, we're now actually adding an inflation factor. And I think what Paul added is the further out we put something in the CIP, I think we're adding 4.5% for every year that we delay something out. So when you're seeing these costs, when we show them further out, we're showing you what that cost is as it sits delayed.
So we try to do our best with that as we hone in on projects, or you all hone in on projects. You might see some of the numbers change because scope could change, and we can keep you updated, or we're going to have more time to focus in on 5 projects versus 73 projects. So we'll continue to look at that, and I'm going to turn it over to the mayor. And
Well, what I was going to suggest, there's so many projects you went through, and you went through them very fast, and the board had, I think they had questions along the way. What would you think about maybe just starting back at the beginning and give a snippet and let the board decide whether they want to comment on that particular project? Would that work for y'all?
perfect.
And one thing while we start back, one of the things we've talked about is we have the project shown how we have originally planned to design them, and especially some of the projects that may be in the early stages or we haven't designed. There's always other alternatives to go back if you have ideas or thoughts about how you might want to see something done differently. Certainly, there's infinite options to go back and try to design something, and that we could go through tons of different options. But I'll give you an example: Eddie Lane. So what we're showing is to rebuild Eddie Lane to city design standard, curb and gutter, sidewalks on both sides, 3-lane typical section. That's what Connect Franklin shows. That's what our city standard is, to rebuild that roadway fully, get it up to city standard. If all you truly want on that roadway is a sidewalk on one side of the roadway or the other side of the roadway, that can be done, but understand that it does not come along with fixing drainage. And then in the future, when you want to go in and address issues on that roadway, or there's a drainage issue, there's a utility issue, that what you just put in may be throwaway. So that's going to get, what you invested in that is going to be ripped out and had to be put back in. So there, you may do something very cheaply now, but in a few years, if something else has to be put in, we may rip that out. So we're showing you what the cost is to go ahead and do the whole project now. But there are other alternatives to come in and do a cheaper project.
So, Mayor, this is the first slide of projects that have been funded in previous plans, and I'd be interested to hear feedback on which ones you would like thrown back into the prioritization process, or we can keep the list. It's totally up to y'all to discuss.
And one of the things while you're looking up there, the one that says bundled bridge projects, the two that were previously, that project actually includes 5 projects. 3 of those are maintenance projects. That one's already bid out. So it's actually under construction contract now. That includes the West Main Bridge, the Pratt Lane Bridge replacement, the Baker's Bridge rehab on that bridge to fix the ends of the bridge, the Mallory Lane Bridge right there south of Jordan Road to fix the bridge ends where they're kind of rough. We're going to fix those, and also the culvert replacement on Spencer Creek. There's actually 5 small projects in, that's what we call a bundled bridge project. So just a heads up on what that actually includes.
So one thought, I want to be careful here about how we look at this in terms of talking about pulling things out or reprioritizing. Would you rather do that in the prioritization process when looking at everything than saying today, pull that back out? I mean, we could look at everything that's in the design stage and make that eligible for reconsideration. I just throw that out with maybe the exception of Long Lane
I was gonna say, where's Long
Bridge,
Lane?
because we've spent $5 million. We've acquired right away. We've built the pier in the middle of the highway. You're pretty far committed, even though you may not be quite as far along in the life cycle. But a thought might be, if you want to say, those with the dot on the far left, we may just put those in for prioritization consideration anyway, or instead of tonight trying to say what should be reprioritized and which shouldn't. Just a thought in terms of, our goal is to first understand projects and get your feedback. Have we accurately described things you want to see done? Are we missing something? That kind of thing. And then we could look at how you put things that have previously been in the plan with your other priorities. I'm just open to how you want to handle that. We'll go either way. But
Mayor, I'd suggest that's a great idea, because we could talk a lot about, I think we need to go on down, but I would say with the exception of putting Long Lane and Paytonsville Road, I mean, it's half the cost of City Hall. I think it's and that has escalated. I think we need some further discussion. I don't know if that's tonight, but if we do have a further discussion, I think putting that on there, along with the other ones that are in design phase, I think that certainly makes sense to do it like that. That way we don't go through all these and all the slides you got.
But wait, excuse me, the Long Lane and Old Patesville Road collector is not the going over the interstate, is it?
Yes, it is.
Long Lane overpass.
Overpass.
Yeah.
No, you're,
Okay.
that's the 45 minutes.
The 45 million.
That's the one that goes way over the interstate.
Yeah, it's got 45.
Yes.
And I will tell you on that project specifically, we're looking at bringing options back to the board because that scope can be dramatically decreased. For example, we could just tie the bridge down and be done with it, and we'll leave a gap section, but you could certainly reduce that scope to some degree. I think at this point, we're just trying to get the design completed so that we could bring that option forward.
Paul, explain tie the bridge down and leave a gap.
Do that.
What does that mean?
Okay, so if you recall, the original project scope on that project was you build the bridge that actually crosses the roadway and connects Long Lane and Old Paytonsville Road. So when you do that, Old Paytonsville Road right now makes that kind of dogleg curve right there at the interstate and goes back down. So in the future, Old Paytonsville Road actually goes under that connector bridge. So when it does that, we have to realign where that curve is because the bridge comes across, actually, I'll tell you what, let me just show it.
I think this is kind of why I wanted to move this to
Yeah.
because we could go down this one topic and spend a lot of time on it. And I think we all probably want to do that. But we also have 30 more minutes for the rest of these projects, but it's fair.
When you want to flag things, we can circle back too, however you all
Yeah.
want to do it. It's your time, and we want to just help walk through things.
Okay,
Just, I can't see us not continuing all those projects that are in the right of way or bidding area. So that gets you down to Church Street, which is in the design phase, and then that looks like where we would be focusing is kind of that bottom half of the list.
And I will say on Church Street, that one's in the early stages of design. We have done, we've done survey, we've done.
So it's got a lot of
subsurface utility. It's got a lot of
infrastructure,
infrastructure, and it's going to
stormwater.
be, and it will be an expensive construction project.
You want to just flip through them again?
yep, I can do that.
Is that okay with
Okay.
everybody? Just flip through them and then maybe it'll stimulate some more answers.
I feel, and I owe an apology. Can you just tell us what tie down the bridge is
I
quickly?
can't. I
'Cause
think I told Paul to give me the laser pointer, and
I
I'll show you
cut
that.
Brandy.
You
That
can
is
go to that
important.
next
I'm sorry. Apologize.
All good.
There you go.
As you're pulling that up, I will share, I have received a lot of requests regarding this overpass and redesign and design schematics. So I think it is important for us to dig deeper into this, like Alderman Baggett's saying, but this is a standalone.
With a,
30-minute
it's easier for me to show. I
conversation.
can give you the brief 5-minute explanation with picture.
Okay.
I know.
Where's
We
the-
not get any help for this?
That already helped.
I actually.
I mean,
I
is there any more grants out
I
there?
actually put this one in the RTP last time we did the RTP.
Nothing?
And it was shown for illustrative. It did not make the cut for funding.
Oh, it didn't.
It did not, no.
So
I
what?
actually did put this one in there.
Why
It's
not?
all local road.
Yeah, it's
stuff.
a local
It's harder
road and it
for us
really.
to-
What is
doesn't-
tying down the bridge?
Yeah,
That's what I'm gonna-
we're getting to a graph.
So
We'll
where-
get into a
We'll get you a
graph.
picture
where
now.
is it in here?
You get a bunch of ropes, you tie the dang thing down and put the cars on it.
16017.
But basically, while he's pulling that up, what he's getting at with tying down the bridge is, we extended the limits to go ahead and upgrade Old Paytonsville Road all the way to Lewisburg Pike. And we extended, there was gonna be a short gap section on Long Lane to extend, go ahead and improve the section of Long Lane down in front of, and there we go. We'll do this one over here. So really, all you gotta do.
back?
That one just
Make
doesn't.
sure I'm not blind anyway. Don't look directly at the laser. So the original project, if you recall, was, the main part of it is the bridge right here. That's what TDOT built the 3 piers for. The reason they did that, the board at the time passed a resolution and said we would make it a priority project. We didn't give a definite time frame, but we said, as the city of Franklin, we'll make it a priority project to get the connection built. Whatever that means to you individually. So, but they built that for us because that would make limited disturbance to I-65 whenever we built the bridge. So they built that at no cost to us.
So we established the alignment.
That's
though, at that
correct.
point.
We established
Enough
the-
engineering to
We
establish. an
established the alignment and the elevation of the bridge.
Great.
So we have preliminary plans for the bridge far enough along that we knew where the bridge was gonna be. So we know that we have to, the bridge has gotta be here, so the existing roadway comes around here. So we know we've got, Warrior Drive's gonna stay here, so we still gotta provide access to here. We know Old Paytonsville Road's gonna stay here, so we still gotta provide that access. So with the bridge coming along here on this lower track and tying it up here, we know we've gotta build at least to here, and we've gotta build at least to here. And with the intersection itself had to move over from Long Lane over to here just to tie the intersection here. We know because of the realignment, Long Lane has got to go to at least here, that first, kind of right past that first entrance. So we can actually stop the project right here at Long Lane, which leaves you about, I don't know, a 1,500-foot section of Long Lane that would be incomplete here. So that one incomplete section of Long Lane left from when TDOT did the interstate project and improved Long Lane. So that's
Define
why
what-
we extended this section.
Define what you mean by incomplete.
So it would be a narrow 2-lane section of Long Lane that would, you have the curb and gutter section from Paytonsville Road. You would then go down basically to this industrial court right here where it's, would go from curb and gutter, then it would go to just a ditch section, and then it would pick up to curb and gutter right back here where we would tie in the project at minimum.
Okay, thank you.
And you would come up here to the intersection where we had to tie in the intersection of Long Lane and Long Lane. So that'll be an interesting sign in the future. Long lane, and Old Paynesville Road. So this is where the intersection will be in the future. We can shorten this a little bit, not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of savings there one way or the other. So we would go ahead and build this leg out to tie the roadway in. We can see what we can do to shorten that, but again, not much savings. So we would build here, come across, have to build to here because that's where we're tying the road in. And because we're realigning the roadway of Old Paynesville Road and that connector, we have to build this extension to Warrior Drive. And we don't necessarily have to build this. So you could cut this out and not do this improvement to Old Paynesville Road. You could potentially leave this out if you wanted to. And that also means you can leave from here. You can leave all of this out. We were just doing the improvement. This is what got added on. So when Paul said tie it down, you're basically just doing the minimum amount of the project and tying the bridge down and tying the project in as quickly as possible. So really what that cuts out is any right-of-way purchases here for now if you want to, or you can go ahead and buy the right-of-way. So it gives you the option, if you want to do it in the future, we can buy the right-of-way now because we know the land's probably going to be cheaper now. So buy the land now, or you just wait and buy the land in the future and do the project in the, there's a lot of options. So you can buy the land now, do the project in the future, the extension, or you can wait to do all of it in the future whenever you want to do the extensions.
And I do think you'll need the signal from day one.
Have
Yes.
you priced cost the difference?
We have not yet.
That would be great as we're making this decision because it would help us allow for other projects to be
We
approved.
could almost give you, like, treat them like
A
two
and
different
B.
projects, yeah, A and B.
You do A and B, but I would want like a 2A or a 2B because the Lewisburg Pike, the feedback that I get right now is the buildup and the backup right there as people are trying to turn westbound right there on the Henpeck Lane. That I think we put the temporary signal.
School did
The
that.
school did that.
School
That is
did
actually
that,
not even in
okay.
our jurisdiction.
All right.
So this
So
actually-
that's another reason why we need this
Yeah,
right
this is
here.
actually extended a little bit further than we would build. We would not build to this limit here.
Okay.
We would just put, if we did all of this, we would just put what's necessary to get our turn lanes in for the signal itself.
All right.
So we probably would not go quite that far,
Okay.
even in that whole signal.
Okay, I want to say something about a part that you haven't talked about. If you're looking at the long lane side over there, what is the height right there? And then whenever you look at what the elevation or the height is over the interstate, I mean, that is a huge down. And figuring out how to build a bridge there that's not going to, I mean, really, whatever the thing that whenever you go out there and look at it, it looks like you're going to have to be going down, I don't know how many, having something that's just, just almost going straight down, not going straight down.
The
The grade
grade
on
is
it
tough.
is really, really bad. And if you have that, as somebody was saying, how are semi-trucks going to go across there or something like that? But the other thing, if it ever is a cold night, it's going to freeze up. No question about it. And I mean, and if the grade is real high, it's not going to work.
It's about a 9% slope.
Yeah, see?
It's steep in Middle Tennessee, but you go to East Tennessee and that's not steep at all. That's
Well, but wait,
pretty
but
normal.
let me ask you, what is our maximum grade, on the streets?
I mean, McEwen's going to have very similar grades on it as well, just because of the terrain. It's just, sometimes you can't avoid it, but it would be acceptable.
Well, as I say, everybody ought to drive out their own long lane and then look across the interstate. I mean, it is just going down.
That's probably why the glide path is so long, is that to gradually,
Trying to work with that.
Slowly.
Well,
yeah.
There's also wetland
That's why it's a
right
wider
there
bridge,
as well.
Or longer bridge.
That's good discussion.
And just generally speaking, range of what can be cut off there, just throwing a number out there, you're probably looking in the range of $10 million that can be cut. Fairly straightforward, if you want to cut that out.
So we'll try to provide you with some alternative versions of the long lane project so that you can look at that and consider that. Like I said, you're pretty far along. I would be concerned about pulling the plug on the project because you've gotten pretty far along.
But there are variations.
Yeah, there are variations we could look at.
We need more time to discuss. I
Yeah.
think a lot of us have comments on this, and I think we do have another $1 billion to go through.
Yeah.
And I think that,
Just a billion.
I know, and because this is very important, because I think there's a lot of commercial development potential on the other side of the interstate from this, where private development could come into play in the future, the Ag Center property, the Baskin property. There's a lot of factors, and I think we need to figure out how to not go back on our word with the state and also do this with that in mind. This is only going to help, I mean, it's going to help residents get to
Yes.
Lewisburg Pike,
Yeah.
but it's really going to help the commercial, when they want to put commercial on the interstate, and they're going to need to pay. It looks like an off-site improvement that right now, quite frankly, Long Lane does not have the traffic demand to justify half the cost of City Hall right now. We've got to figure out how to get it cheaper to get it done, but also there's other funding ways to do this. Southeast, people in West Haven, I don't think need to be paying for this right now. There's all this new development that's going to be the reason we need it, that hasn't happened yet. Today's current development doesn't really justify this. It will, and it does. I mean, let's look at the traffic counts for 45. What other traffic projects? This is why I didn't want to go into it, because I didn't.
You've got a pretty big node there that you've only got one way across the interstate. That's
We
the
got a
problem.
fire station on the
That's
other
a
side
problem.
now. We got two now. We got Carruthers.
You got
we can
one
now
way
get from
across.
96. Carruthers, we couldn't get we could not get across the interstate because Carruthers wasn't finished. We've got Carruthers and we've got Paytonsville Road, or Goose Creek, excuse me.
Yeah, that's a significant issue.
Yeah,
It is not fully addressed by those improvements. That's why this was the top priority.
Because of
last
the
time.
bridge and the truck.
And the
Yes, that's
connection,
right.
that you have only one connection east to west
But
in a
that was
pretty wide area.
Now there's two.
It's 6
No,
miles.
there's one.
It's
We
6
could not
miles,
get
but
to that side of the interstate from 96.
I just read this.
Now
out.
you can.
It's 6 miles in between interchanges. I mean, that's a pretty big distance in a growing area. Goose Creek is totally projected to have failure on it. It'll function a lot like Highway 96 in the future, and this is going to be a very important alternative access long-term.
I just think it was prioritized because of the truck situation, and I think that, yes, this has to get
Well, the
done.
truck was an example of the deficiency.
Yep.
And a deficiency we still have.
And now we have a fire station and EMS across the street.
And that's huge.
So why else, I mean, I guess people can go up to, they can still get on the interstate see, this is why
Yeah.
this needs more time, because I think there are a lot of the questions that we have, but I don't know that we do have more other projects.
6 miles is a really long distance.
$45 million is a lot of money, and I think there's.
You just need to, yeah. Yeah, we'll have the discussion.
We'll have the discussion, but TIF, we haven't talked about TIF traffic district in here for all these improvements at Goose. We got almost $100 million in Goose Creek traffic improvements for stuff that hadn't been built, hadn't approved. We don't even really have a Goose Creek study that we're fully implementing yet, or maybe we do. Almost $100 million in road improvements, not counting the stuff that, I guess, the interchange. We got to have a way to finance our roads in that southeast corridor. And I don't know that the citizens would want their representatives necessarily throwing $100 million cost of City Hall at stuff that people that aren't even here yet. We got to come up with a better financing solution. I hope we look at TIFs and other creative financing for roads.
Mention East McEwen, that's phase 5. Is that correct? The one that we're already obligated to build whenever
That's
Lewisburg pulls the
developer
trigger?
driven
Yeah.
though. So that's going to stay there until, have we heard anything
No,
about it being
it's
developed?
not developer-driven. It is time-driven. When you complete Phase 4 of McEwen, then you have to move into that project.
We've always
Now,
said it was
now Brentwood's paying about 60% of it, high 50% of it. You're paying the other portion, but it does,
I know.
it does move, after you do 4, you're moving into that project.
I thought we did not have to do that right away.
It
Are we-
follows.
are we held to that-
4 follows
that
5.
too?
You have updated that agreement. You got out of
Yeah.
some really,
I know.
really
Another
difficult
I know.
timeframes to make it driven by the completion of this project and then moving into the next. And more funded by
Well,
Brentwood
we've
than
always said
by
it was
Franklin.
developer-driven, but then that agreement doesn't allow us to wait on that.
Well, you have a revised agreement that provides for how that moves forward once you complete 4. And before that, you had
Yeah.
a hard time frame,
Yeah.
and you were also
No. That's
right.
just saying developers were going to pay certain amounts
Yeah.
that you really didn't have the capability, either Brentwood or Franklin, to obtain. So we have a realistic way forward on it now.
I would
But you
s-
have committed to
can't-
that once you've
Yeah, 'cause we
completed
can't-
4.
We can't get out of
I
that.
want
Yeah.
to say one thing that was just talked about, 6 miles between intersections and everything. If you look, as you go on down south toward Spring Hill, but I mean, it's not just that. They don't have 6 miles apart. I mean, they've gotten other connections to the interstate that's much closer than these that we have in Franklin. And I don't know how they were able to do it, but they certainly have. They have many more.
Yeah, up in the Cool Springs area, they're about a mile apart.
Yeah, it's
Well,
different
yeah,
in the
I
northern
understand
frame than the south.
But still, if you look about
Another
going down
reason for
there,
us to look at trying to get another flyover closer to 840.
yeah, yeah.
The other, the reason I brought up McEwen 5 is because, we've obligated that money. So, I mean, it's not one we can take off the list. And other ones down there that you want to talk about? Go ahead, Alderman Hanson.
I'll bring up Battle. Paul knows I've been working on a grant. It's been an all-summer series and kind of identified Battle as one of them because one of the criteria of the grant is the equitable nature of the grant. And in being equitable, does it connect a less dense or less served part of town to a more served part of town? In this case, we also have an ADA issue. That application, they do help you complete the grant. We don't know how much yet, but it is something that we can apply for in the next 45 days for the Battle Avenue Bridge.
So what grant is that, Alderman
It's
Hanson?
through the Infrastructure Hub, the National League of Cities, and it's a special project for smaller communities to access grant money that's out there that billions of dollars get left on the table every year, and many times it's the smaller cities that get left out of these grant funds. So they developed a program called the Infrastructure Hub, and then they have training and assistance in writing the grant, helping you identify the most likely target to get that grant money and then get it over the finish line for the smaller city, who typically doesn't have a grant writer in-house. We're considered a small
So
city.
we are under 100,000. So is our grant writing people on this?
We better get that one quick if we're gonna be considered a small
I mean,
city.
yeah,
Right.
very quick, like tomorrow.
I know Alderman Hanson's been working on it. I'm not totally familiar with the grant, and if this is something a project the board wants to move forward with, obviously, we would try to find any grant or any partnership.
Is Battle Avenue even on the CIP list?
Battle Avenue is not, but we did put the bridge, just as ped
bridge.
This has
replacement.
been identified.
Is the-
This
is
is the
the
bridge project. You do give authority to the city administrator to submit grant applications. So if we see something we're ready to do or able to do, we can submit it.
And after September 8th, we'll have the final details of it all. We have 2 more sessions before it's wrapped up, and then I'll have all the final details, and we'll provide it to Paul and
Yep.
Eric.
If y'all
on what
provide it
that
to us,
looks
we'll
like.
So you have
absolutely
to get your people
put
on
it
it, by the
together.
way.
Will not be a problem. So did y'all want to go back to the first slide and start working down, or?
Well,
We've got about
What's
15
the-
minutes left, so,
I just want to, I had a bunch of questions, I don't even know where they are now. Impact, okay, so I have a question.
we'll let you go then.
So-
Go ahead.
Mallory, thank you. Mallory Lane at Royal Oak Celebrity. Most of that, if I'm not mistaken, that is 16 of 11. I've got to go back here and find it. Isn't it written down 16 11? Yeah, I'm sorry. Is that mostly paid for by impact fees?
What's the project
Which
number
project?
again?
Yeah,
Mallory Liberty.
yeah, 16 ST 616011. So it's impact fees, most of those are, then you have water renewal, wastewater renewal.
And remember, we identify potential funding, but ultimately the finance department works directly with Eric on whether it's bond funded or impact fee
Yeah.
paid or.
We've got a boatload of road impact fees going to that. We should, because of all the,
Remember, this is engineering's take on where we think the money's gonna come from. So
Well-
not, it's a draft, not Michael
Yeah.
Walters Young approved yet.
we had all that development over there, so that should be paying for that.
Although we did,
The-
this is similar to what we planned out, because this was in the
It was.
existing CIP.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is
It's very similar.
consistent
It's
with what
consistent with
what we allocated, what we saw as funding components.
Okay, and then.
So it's probably pretty similar.
16025, let me tell you about that, because I know the last couple of years, we have not talked about that. Let me just talk about that. You said HOA owns that across the street on the, wait a minute, northeast.
Which one?
West side.
1625 Oxford.
On the west side, it's 6025.
So in the
This-
upper
we've got-
left-hand
I
corner
don't know,
of these
somebody said
pages
something
is the
about-
project number,
Yeah.
if people are looking for that.
Oh, I'm
And it's
sorry.
in order.
That's the one that you had talked about before, having a sidewalk, if I remember
Oh, yeah,
correctly.
because, okay, the HOA owns that property across the street
Yes.
from them.
They own a good chunk of it. I think
Okay,
it's McKay's
so
Mill
I'm gonna work with them. We
and
gotta
Garden
get-
Club.
Garden Club Estates. So I'm gonna work with them so we can get that right away because we need, because they're part of the people that want that.
Yeah.
But we have people walking on that road, and that road is very hilly. It goes like this all the way down. So if you see where it goes down, it comes out at the very bottom of the slide where it starts red. That's where Garden Club Estates is. Then before that, you got your Publix and everybody down here. So it's heavily trafficked. Heavily trafficked. We have no sidewalks, and we have hopefully an entrance eventually into the park off of that when we get to the roundabout down there at McEwen. Off to your right there, that's where our McEwen will start, where that 4-lane starts and goes out to Wilson Pike, that we're going to build the 4-lane starting this year. So, this next year. So we've got people with strollers, we've got runners, I couldn't believe I drove up there again the other day and some guy is running with this stroller and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane. Because people go fairly fast on that road and it's curvy and then you come over the rise and you don't see people. And then we have Avalon going to be started down there by the roundabout. Roll the drum, we're going to have Avalon start pretty soon. So they're working with the city right now to get approvals. So we're going to have Avalon built down there. So once we have that, we're going to have massive amounts of walking here with nowhere to go. And people just can't get anywhere. So this is why this portion is so important. So if I could work with the HOA, y'all could help me with that.
Absolutely.
We could start that conversation to get the right of way. Then maybe we can start looking at funding for this because this is going to be really important. Now, the parks probably won't get started with their development probably till 2024 sometime. Maybe break ground next summer. Maybe, for infrastructure. So I talk to them constantly. So I think maybe next summer they'll start infrastructure there. So we have a few years to get that in place before things start going in down there and causing a lot more foot traffic. So that's just why I wanted to bring that up, so everybody would be familiar with it. Please, if not, please just go over there and drive it. Go down McEwen East when you get to Cool Springs and Oxford Glen, go up that hill on Oxford Glen and go all the way to the Publix. You'll see what I mean. I just want to talk about that real quick. And then the other one is, what are we going to do at Mallory Lane and McEwen? How are we going to improve that? That's 24002.
It's essentially just adding
lanes.
needed turn lanes to increase capacity at the interchange.
So you really
Intersection
can't
to the
add
interchange.
turn lanes. Where would you add them? Because you've got the hill on one side, you've got Whole Foods on the other. You have the open land. I believe the parks still own that land. Barry Alexander owned it, Parks bought it. That land's available possibly to cut into. You don't have much room for turn.
It was actually studied as part of the Cool Springs Transportation Study. I can't remember the exact laneage that we were going to add, but it did identify multiple turn lanes that needed to be added, and there was available room to do so. We'd have to acquire right away, but we would be able to do it without
Well,
major impacts to the
I'd
businesses.
start talking to the parks, because I think they own that before they develop that area. I'm glad it didn't get developed, but if you're going
If they-
west on McEwen and you get to Mallory Lane, you take a right and go up Mallory Lane going north. That section right there is that open land, and you'd have room for a turn
And if they
lane.
try to develop, we will ensure that we acquire that right away. More than likely,
But I
they're
don't-
going to trigger the
I don't see
offsite
where
improvements.
else we'd have room for a turn lane. I mean, you could cut into the Whole Foods area. But anyway, okay, that's it. I won't keep you. Thanks.
Alderman Potts. Well, I wanted to ask Alderman Hanson a question. Is there a match on that grant that you're talking about, Alderman Hanson?
They're hoping possibly not.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
not.
Thanks, sir.
I'm sorry, would you mind?
No, go ahead.
I had these marked, and I forgot this one, just Clovercroft Road. Yeah, so we're talking to the county about doing a partnership. They would do their part in the county, we would do our part in the city. And it's it's not feasible to think that we could do Clovercroft 4-lane. That would be more than a McEwen project almost because of because it's so long. So if we can do something in partnership with them, then what we could do, because we're going to have some massive development over there, and we wanted to do in certain spot areas, widen the shoulder about 2 feet on both sides, take out a couple curves that were dangerous. We've had 2 deaths over there, don't want any more, and we've had 3 rollovers in the last year and a half. I think it's 2 years. And I actually knew 3 of the people that were rolled over in those cars. So we need to fix that, and the city's got to fix their part, and we need to find some kind of funding just to do some spot improvements.
What we can do is we'll put together a spot improvement project that we can add to the list for, because it's not going to be close to 35 million. It'll be a lot less. But we can add that to the list.
And Poplar Farms is doing turn lanes in there. I don't know how soon they're putting turn lanes, but it's not soon enough, and probably. And then there's going to be a signal at Market Street because they are putting through Market Street to 96. All right, that's it. Thanks. Thanks, Jason.
Yes, ma'am.
You got 7 minutes.
I got 2 questions. I'll make them real fast. I think these will be quick. 16022 Carruthers Parkway, Long Lane, Carruthers. Is there an opportunity there for any sidewalk gap funding?
Yeah, I know that that's a controversial issue. Yes, you could definitely do it, but any funding you spend there will be throwaway.
Right, and I get that, but I'm looking from, once we open up Southeastern Park and LEGs and all of those, I'm looking at from the safety perspective and the ADA need for wheelchairs or anything else that's going that direction. So I would just want to see, aside from the full.
Could we give a cost estimate?
Yeah, we can add that
Okay.
to the list and create a project sheet for it.
Yep.
I know there's a lot of folks that have asked for it.
Okay, and then the other is 19003 Machatcher Parkway Southeastern widening. My question is really more to staff, is knowing what we've just now invested, the $5 million plus, where does that now place us on the board? Is that now at the, just on the preliminary side of the designs phase of the red column, or?
Well, the good thing is we haven't invested anything yet. So
All right.
we've actually put in a request to participate in part of one of the programs with the Transportation Modernization Act that was recently passed by the state, the legislation by the state funds only, their statewide partnership program. They recently did a call for projects at the statewide level where they're actually doling out, I think it's like $750 million. I may get that number wrong, per each 4 region of the state, and they may not do that all, do all that money. They haven't figured out how they're doing it yet, but they're figuring out how they're going to spend the state money that they did with that legislation. So they did a call for projects. and asked, how would you figure out how you would want to partner with us? We put forward and said, hey, Mac Hatcher's been something we wanted to do for years. And our offer was, this is why we want to do it. Here's what we're putting forward. We would offer up to the $5 million. Of course, like Eric said earlier, that's still up to the board. Eventually, if we even get the offer to do it, you would still have to approve that. But right now, we haven't even heard from the state if that's been considered to do yet. We haven't heard back. We only submitted that about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
And we understand that probably we won't hear anything till maybe in December.
That's what I've heard, closer to the end of the year.
Yep.
I think it would get us through most of the design phase, if not all of it.
I
I think
wouldn't-
this design cost is probably a little high that we're showing. But I think it could get us through most of that design.
Yeah, actually, that design, I would expect the design and planning to be closer to 5 million. The reason that shows the 89, the way the grant laid out, it shows the 8.9 million is because there's already a little over almost $3 million shown in the tip for design right now. So it's about half of what's needed, in my opinion, for design at the MPO level. So when I asked for the grant, it asked how much money is sitting there for design, proposed for design. So when I showed that we were proposing $5 million, just the way the grant application worked out, it showed closer to $8 million being there. That's not really what we're proposing. I expect the $5 million would cover both environmental and full design. So what we're offering would cover both.
Good.
That at least that was my intent on making that offer.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes.
Is that all, Alderman Fox?
Yes, sir.
Alderman Barnhill.
Mine will be pretty short and sweet. We've got Carlisle for 20 million. That we don't even connect to either 96 or to McHatcher. So there's no intersection connection there or there. That just seems like an awful lot. And I understand we're running down Boyd Mill and first one thing or another, but it seems like an awful lot because it can't be more than there can't be a mile of that.
So this is the extent of it that was included in the estimate. There is a lot of right-of-way acquisition costs associated with
Okay.
this. There'll be utilities. Again, you could try to shorten the project to fix the S-curves, or you could try to, we were just filling in so that there wouldn't be a gap on improved section. But there's lots of options on how you could proceed, or you could simply pull the funding.
And this becomes, the proposed was go 3 lanes, correct?
I think it was two with a turn lane.
Okay.
Well, you've got it.
Well, it
Maybe
says
3.
4-lane road.
I'm just saying, you've got it as a
Oh, I'm
five-star
looking at the wrong thing.
project.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Should say 2
Yeah,
to
it's
3.
it's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
And Jonathan's right, it'd probably end up being 3-lane with all the subdivisions.
So, but what I'm saying is you've got it as a five-star project.
Well, and the reason it was a 5-star project is because in the last CIP in 2019, it was selected as a project
funded it.
that was funded.
You all selected it, not
It was one of
us.
the 30 projects that were approved.
Yeah.
You done?
I'm done.
Alderman Brown, you got 2 minutes.
I've never been able to work in that kind of limitation.
I'm gonna give
Here we
you
go.
all the time you need.
I'm going to go as fast as I can. 3 things. One, and I'll speak for a couple of us up here, I believe, Old Liberty Pike, we need some options, and that needs to be included in this evaluation. So if we can work that one up, really important. Second thing, just real quick on Carlisle, really great. We worked with the HOAs at Cornerstone and Carlisle. Ned actually did some really great survey work over there in terms of what people were looking for. The neighbors over there are pretty good with the fact that they realize Carlisle Lane probably is not going to get done, but we were able to use sidewalk gap funding, and this fall we'll put sidewalks in that'll cover those 2 neighborhoods all the way to 96. So they're pretty happy that they're going to have a connectivity to the trails, and I think that would actually take a lot of the pressure off, making it really pretty easy to remove the Carlisle Lane out of this project. I think we've solved a lot of challenges over
And
there.
that could be a sidewalk gap project.
It
It's
is,
inexpensive
yes.
enough to fit that.
Correct. And they were great enough to, the HOAs donated the easements and all that, which made that workable from a gap. So thank you for that. And I think that's a good solve for Carlisle Lane. Then my only real question, because I think you were trying to look for where we had some questions, on the Cool Springs Mallory. It's not a lot of improvement. It's not a very big project. I guess my only question on that one is, in terms of throwaway, when I look at those 4 corners, there's a lot of opportunity on those 4 corners. I would argue probably a lot could potentially happen there. And my only question is, do we have a vision, if in fact those 4 corners got redeveloped, which I think is likely, do we have a different vision for how we might look at that intersection if we had a chance to have new commercial nodes that came in there and helped us redevelop? And if we do have a bigger vision for how we might reimagine that entire intersection to make it better, how would that play into this temporary sort of
Yeah,
move?
great question. With the Cool Springs transportation study that we did, I think we identified 63 projects. We looked at a lot of infill. And so what we use that plan for is when developers come in to make an investment, we generally already know what we want at full build out as they start filling in parking lots and doing various redevelopments. And so that plan helps guide us. And Adam Mosier in our office and David, our traffic engineers, try to keep those models updated. And so that when they come to make an investment, we're ready to answer the question. But yes, we do. 63 projects there that we would look to partner with development as they proceed.
And unfortunately, to the bigger question you're asking there, the overall intersection itself
Yes.
is really because because you're dealing with those two arterials, Cool Springs and Mallory Lane, unless you're going to reimagine that entire area, not just the intersection, it becomes difficult to really do a whole lot there unless you're willing to start adjusting down the roadways, which gets to be tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to start readjusting down frame. So it's really, your options there are very limited when you're talking about, you can do some laneage improvements, you start adding lanes, you start maybe doing some signal improvements, maybe add different types of phasing, like we did the adaptive project. Like right now, we've got some shared lanes, like they're shared through rights there. Maybe you do dedicated lanes there. There's things like that we can do now. But with the interchange where it's at, and those two being arterial roadways, with so much infrastructure already in the place, it's very limited what we can do outside of the range of what's already there.
Another thing I would point out about that area is that big piece of land that the ramp occupies, which is not being utilized. So that's such a poorly designed, now it's poorly designed.
Yes, and that's really, unless you start talking about what can we do at the interchange level, if you start talking that level, then you're opening up your options. What can we do there if we're talking about redoing the entire interchange? But then you're talking about that whole corridor between Mallory Lane and Carruthers Parkway, and you're talking about $150 million job easily.
Sure.
We're done. Thanks, everybody.
So we'll be reaching out to you to schedule some additional
Schedule a
sessions
different
and we'll pick this up. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And one quick thing, if you have any additional projects, please, again, let us know those.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the whole stack. I have it in my.